With that, let's move to our next paper, which Betsey Stevenson is presenting on what is there to fear in a post-AGI world, and I'll let you spell out that last subtitle.
Finding our Ikigai. Yeah, we're going to change tone, I think, here a little bit. And I'm hoping to actually bring some optimism to it. And I'll start with this Onion clip from The Onion from about a year ago. It's a frightening prospect, but I'm starting to seriously believe that the day I find myself replaced by a robot is never coming. It's sad to think jobs like these may still be here for my children. And I find this quote very, very humorous for a couple of reasons. One, it really is mocking the ridiculousness of the nostalgia for past, hard, tedious jobs. That when we used physical labor and did things that were hard and physically uncomfortable, they were hard and physically uncomfortable. And I think it's worth actually imagining whether 100 years ago people would be telling jokes like that about the kind of hard and tedious intellectual work that we do in our society today. People are highly compensated for that work in finance or law or medicine, but it's kind of tedious and sometimes quite uncomfortable. And so we might also think, boy, aren't we glad that AGI was here to replace that. It also sort of highlights the fact that people like to think that the world will continue to get better in some way, right? The fear is that their kid will actually still be working in a factory. What I want to do today is I want to lay out, first of all, one fact, which is, will all this economic growth that comes from transformative AI make us better off? And for that, we need to turn back to this income on happiness, relationship between happiness and income. And then I want to introduce the concept of Ikigai. And for those of you who've heard of it, it's not what you think, because it got a Western fire underneath it and was used in a way that it is not sort of the original Japanese. But there's something there, and I had the pleasure of discussing a paper on data on Ikigai in Japan this summer, so we are actually starting to learn some things about it. And then I want to explore lessons from the technological revolution that eliminated work for women. Yeah, I'm talking about the vacuum cleaner and the dishwasher and the washing machine, and how that changed women's lives. And what we can learn if you go back to the feminist literature from the 1960s, which I'm sure all of you are very well steeped in, to understand sort of what they were saying about meaning and purpose, and what women should do now that they didn't have to spend so much time at home. And then I want to sort of wrap up with a sense that what's really going to matter here is the time and the options created in each phase of AI adoption. So thinking about not just where we're going, but the path we go along and the stops we make along the way and how government responds is probably, in my mind, much more important than whether AI is an augmenting or replacing labor. Okay, so that's where I'm going. I want to start with these facts about happiness and income. So I've got 5 facts. I'm going to go through each one of them. Happiness, or overall life satisfaction, has risen with the log of income in a consistent way across countries, within people, within countries, and over time within countries. That is a fact. So, good news, when we get richer, we do get happier. That is, in fact, true. When we turn to data, typically what tends to be looked at is what is called subjective well-being data, but there's sort of 2 big questions. Satisfaction, using either a satisfaction ladder or life satisfaction. So here's a ladder representing the ladder of life. Let's suppose the top of the ladder represents the best possible life for you, the bottom the worst. So those are these life satisfaction. They're supposed to be evaluative, but they're asking you, how's your life? Not, does your life have meaning or purpose? So just keep that in mind. And then there's also happiness questions. Taken all together, how would you say things are these days? Would you say that you're pretty happy or very happy or not too happy? Notice that these satisfaction and happiness questions are very highly correlated. And what I'm going to do is show you what's going on with happiness or satisfaction in income. And then we're going to turn to different types of questions that are more around meaning and Ikigai. So subjective well-being scores are closely related with GDP per capita. So here's a basic scatter plot and GDP per capita and average subjective well-being scores, and you can see the correlation is 0.81. A more holistic measure, which looks at Human Development Index instead of the subjective question, also shows very similar relationships. So we sort of know where some of this comes from. People get things usually with more income, like higher life expectancy, lower infant mortality, and when we look within a country, so you just want to say, well, how does happiness rise in the population? How happy is the top 10% in your society compared to the bottom 10%? Again, this is a relationship between satisfaction and the log of family income. And what you can see is these are pretty straight lines. They're pretty straight lines with a very similar beta. And this is like one of the key findings is that the beta of sort of 0.35 shows up across all different types of countries, right? Mexico, the United States, Korea, Ethiopia. They all find something similar, which is, a 10% increase in your income gives a similar increase in your subjective well-being. Of course, it's important to realize that the more income you have, the more income you need to get a 10% increase in your income, right? That's the whole point of diminishing returns. If we look between countries, what we can see is richer countries are happier. So here you have real GDP per capita compared to happiness. Again, you see that beta is 0.35. I wanted to throw this one out there just so you can see, what do people do when they get more money? They look for the simple things in life, right? You know what else is correlated with real GDP per capita across countries? Did you like what you ate yesterday? Turns out, even as we get to middle and high middle income countries, getting richer still means that you're able to make that choice for better tasting food. Were you treated with respect all day yesterday? I wanted to show this one because there's a lot of debate about whether we're going to lose all our status. Status is a limited thing, and as we all get rich, we're going to be fighting over this tiny amount of status. It's not. Look, more people get treated with respect when they're in a richer country. Why? Partially because you have more control. You have a greater choice. You walk away from a disrespectful situation, and you can't walk away from a disrespectful situation if you need to be in it to eat. So that's the facts about income and happiness. Good to know. If we get richer, we will get happier. But remember, there are those diminishing returns. So this concept of satiation, when we get enough income that it just can't make us any better off, remains popular but unproven. I personally think there might be some max, we just don't know. Our brains can't tolerate any more plenty. We could get there. We haven't really seen it in the world, but we do start to see it in emotion, right? So in my data, here what you see, I told you that 0.35 is pretty universal across countries, across time, within countries. But if I separate, as Richard Layard suggested, that we focus on the countries with GDPs less than 15,000 compared to the ones with GDPs above 15,000, it turns out there's a stronger link for richer countries. The link does not get weaker. Now, again, remember, a $100 rise in GDP has a 3 times larger effect in Jamaica than the United States, because of the fact that it's $100, right? And we're taking the log here. But it's not the case that we get any sense of satiation, that it goes away. We just get what economic theory has been telling us for a really long time, diminishing returns to each additional dollar that we get. Now, Danny Kahneman did point out that, it does look like at some point, like, you'd still get in a bad mood, even as you get more income, or you start to experience stress. And this starts to point to the fact that maybe there are some things besides sort of happiness. There are other emotions. I'm just going to tee that up for getting to the eudaimonia. I also want to point out that there are outliers. And one of perhaps the most important one is the country we're standing in, the United States. American people have gotten less happy over the last 30 or 40 years. Nobody knows how to fix that problem. We're pretty miserable. It's actually getting worse, right? Look at what's happened to not too happy. You might have thought, oh, pandemic, yeah, that was bad. Except for we haven't really recovered from the pandemic. And you can see a sort of, maybe there's a downward trend before sort of 2015. For sure, there's a downward trend in the percent of people saying very happy after 2015 and the percent of people saying not too happy. I'm going to tell you the truth. This is a graph from my textbook. I just updated it for the 3rd edition, and I was scratching my head about whether to take it out because unhappiness typically rises with unemployment. What has happened to the United States in the last few years? Unemployment's great. Misery through the roof. Is the relationship broken, or is it just other things matter? It's not just our jobs and our incomes. Eudaimonic measures of well-being have a less clear relationship with income, meaning and purpose. So stop worrying so much we're going to lose our purpose, because our purpose is not that connected to our income. So hedonism, I know that word sounds bad, but it's like the idea of pleasure and happiness. That's really what we're talking about with life satisfaction and happiness. Now this is the word I struggle with. We'll call it your Ikigai, is the idea that it's well-being is the actualization of human potentials. It's meaning, it's purpose, it's learning, it's feeling proud and productive. And that really, there's a much less clear relationship between well-being and income across countries when you focus on these kinds of relationships. Let's just take the question, do you feel your life has an important purpose or meaning? It's negatively correlated across countries when it comes to looking at average GDP per person. Now, look, it's pretty darn noisy, so I'm not going to put a lot on the negative correlation, but it's certainly hard to argue that as we get richer, we're able to buy more meaning or purpose. Were you proud of something you did yesterday? My kids are now older. When they were young, like that's the key insight to keeping kids happy is did they get to experience pride? I think it's actually the key to keeping most of us happy is did we get to experience pride? Not at all correlated. Maybe even a negative coefficient, but it's just noise. Did you feel active and productive? Okay, here this is a little bit more promising. Still not great. Boredom? Nope. Did you learn or do something interesting yesterday? A little bit more promising, but still quite noisy and a pretty low correlation. Do you like what you do each day? Well, here we see a little bit of a positive relationship. So those kinds of questions are getting at measuring Ikigai. This Japanese word that is built from Iki, to live, being alive, gai, worth, value, effect. It's literally the worth of living. That's what that word means. And the object or the source of your Ikigai is different from the feeling it evokes. Now, a lot of you, if you Google Ikigai, and I just want to commend ChatGPT because I asked ChatGPT explain Ikigai for me, and it says don't get confused with the Western co-op of the concept of Ikigai that puts it in a Venn diagram because that actually has nothing to do with the original concept. So a Spanish knowledge worker was like, don't just follow your passions. You need to think about what you love and what the world needs and what you're good at and what you can be paid for. And there at the center of this Venn diagram will be your Ikigai. I disagree. I think this is why we're struggling to consider how our meaning or purpose will change as we lose a job because we're sort of stuck in this Venn diagram. But Ikigai, when originally, well, this is from the Japanese Secret to a Joyful Life from 2022. When we asked people what their Ikigai was, they gave us explicit answers, such as their friends, gardening, art. Everyone knows what their zest for life is and is busily engaged in it every day. That's the whole key. You got to identify it, and then you got to do it. Identify it, you got to know what is the thing that gives you meaning, and then do it. In case you want some empirical evidence, a recent study in the US found meaning rose for low-wage workers once they became eligible for Social Security and retired. So Ikigai isn't clearly related to GDP per capita. And in a recent Japanese study, employment isn't statistically significantly related to Ikigai in Japanese survey respondents. Ikigai was highly related to participation in volunteer activities and community events. Ikigai appears to relate to emotional and relational dimensions of well-being, not work. I should say, it was also correlated in that study with job satisfaction. So you can get your Ikigai from a job. Many of you in here do. I'm not saying that you're wrong and it's not a good life you're living. I am saying that many people don't, and that is also okay. And that may be that our relationship between work and Ikigai is on the cusp of a revolutionary change again because of transformative AI. So the last point I wanted to make is a decade ago, I wrote a paper called The Paradox of Declining Female Happiness. Since the 1970s, women's happiness has fallen behind men's. Despite legal, economic, policy, and technological changes, this has happened globally. The pattern's pervasive. It's robust across questions, demographic groups, countries. It's not easily explained by changes in specific domains of well-being. And so there's sort of three possibilities. Expansion of opportunities made women worse off. The technological revolution that destroyed women's jobs in the home. They were no longer as needed to work in the home. Maybe that left them worse off. It left one, I recently was having a conversation with a group of women about this, and I was like, I don't know, I guess we could all throw out the vacuum cleaners and the dishwashers and go back to doing everything by hand. Is anybody up for that? And nobody was. Nobody thought the solution was to go back to beating rugs. So when we think about what was going on with women, and I should say this is a study that just came out 2 months ago in Science Advances that found this same, that reinforced that in the 10 years since my paper came out, this sort of same idea, small declining decrease in women's happiness relative to men's. Germaine Greer said a quote that I think about a lot. I didn't fight to get women out from behind vacuum cleaners to get them on the board of Hoover. So why did she say that? Was it that she really didn't think it was that women shouldn't have a job? No, that's not what she meant. It's that the crisis of meaning that Betty Friedan, Germaine Greer, and many other people were writing about in the 1960s and 1970s was not necessarily, was about the lack of sort of women feeling complete, that they were trapped in narrow roles. And while many feminists argued that women needed to get out and get a job, and then they were going to get their meaning and their mojo back, what Germaine Greer argued was, no, we needed to disrupt the entire system so that none of us felt that our worth in society was connected to what we were producing, but it would be connected to how we were living. And I think that just comes back to that's going to be what we need to think about in this new world of AI. And I will end by saying I've been thinking a lot about sort of what these three stages of AI and work. And if you go back and compare these historically to any other technological change, what happens in each of the stages, how governments respond, how we respond culturally, how we celebrate or criticize the changing roles people are playing, leads to the outcomes. So in conclusion, income is good. Income doesn't have to make us happier. There are other things that matter for well-being. Meaning and purpose don't rely on jobs. And in every scenario, I think jobs are going to be unrecognizable in a century. Whether we have them or don't, they're going to be different. And the difference between labor augmenting and labor replacing is going to be about people's ability to shift away from declining opportunities and find new ones, not just in terms of work, but in terms of the life that they're living, the path they're carving out for themselves. Can they find what's giving them their Ikigai and get up every day and do it? And so how people react in that post-AGI world will depend on all the choices we make along the way to identify those things. So here's my new Venn diagram of Ikigai for you for scenario 4. Look for your hobbies, causes, people, nature, ideas that bring joys. That's what you love. What you're good at, skills like listening, organizing, storytelling, making others laugh, knowledge about plants or kittens, patience. What does the world need? Emotional labor, community care, cultural preservation, mentorship, activism. What you can be paid for? No, what your community values, the non-monetary rewards such as recognition, respect, gratitude, and love. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much for the opportunity to discuss this really thought-provoking paper. So there are a few facts in the paper that, a couple of facts really core facts from the economics literature in this area that really struck me, and I want to emphasize them. The first one is that we see a negative cross-country correlation between GDP per capita and people finding that life has meaning or purpose. And I think that's a really interesting finding that I wasn't aware of before looking at the paper, so that really caught my attention. And the second one is that if we zoom in to a population whose lives have been transformed over the past century and even more, we've seen that women's life satisfaction declined even while the economic outcomes improved. And that really begs the question of what's going on here, and how can we explain this phenomenon? And so this raises the question: even if AGI were to increase our incomes, even assuming that we don't have a distribution problem, will it really promote well-being if it undermines our sense of meaning or purpose? So I realize this is very small, but I think the idea of looking at this question is a very interesting one, and I really recommend this philosophy book called Automation and Utopia by John Danaher. And so this book takes on the idea of what it would mean to flourish as a human being in a world without work, precisely in the context of AGI, or transformative technology, that the assumption is that it could do most of the work for us. And so then, if that's the case, what are the issues for people to flourish in that circumstance? And he identifies 5 different problems that would arise for people to solve in redefining what it means to be a human. And 2 of them, the ones that I circled there, are more closely related to what Betsey was talking about. One of them is what he calls the severance problem. So this is has something to do with the concept of mastery. People like to be able to master a skill, and by reducing our need for human activity, this automating technology make it so that it looks like we don't matter. Whatever we do doesn't have real consequences on the world. So that's the severance problem, as is we're separated there's a separation between the world out there and what we're able to do to influence the world. And then the second one that I want to talk about is the agency problem, which is there at the bottom. And so there, the idea is that when technology replaces us, it replaces human effort, it undermines our sense of moral agency. So the first one was about mechanical agency, so to speak. Are we able to influence the world by doing something is going to change things? The second one is a values-driven approach. Are we able to feel like morally we're making the world a better place? And that too, to the extent that now things that matter can be accomplished through the machines, why are we here for? As far as our ability to make the world a better place. And I will just mention that there are a number of other issues here, but one of them that is related to earlier papers today is the attention problem. The problem that these machines might take our attention away from the truly valuable things that might make us happy. So really an interesting typology, and I think it's relevant for us economists because it suggest avenues for thinking and research about models or things we might want to measure to try to get at possible scenarios, as in the case that most work gets automated. So this concept of Ikigai really intrigued me because it made me think about, this is an example, my favorite movie perhaps that's called Perfect Days by Wim Wenders. So in this movie, the anti-hero, Hirayama, he really finds joy in the analog world, not digital world, importantly. And I have an ongoing paper about the important distinction between physical and kind of intelligence activities. So this hero, his job is to clean public toilets in Japan. It's a physical job, but what's really remarkable about this character is that he transforms this praxis in Aristotle's terms, so something that seems to be done merely for a purpose and doesn't have a meaning in itself. But the way he does it, it becomes poiesis. That means an activity that has intrinsic meaning and relevance. And so despite, and it's really remarkable, despite the lack of social recognition, you see how people pass by him like he wasn't even there, he didn't even exist. Despite that, you see him like cleaning with intense joy and satisfaction, as he goes about and does his day. And so what's really interesting is that here we don't have, through this physical job, we don't have this severance problem, because he feels certainly that he's making a real difference in the world. Those toilets are getting cleaner after he's gone there. And we also see him pursuing aesthetic pursuits, so the poiesis aspect, such as he listens to cassette music like Perfect Day by Lou Reed, which I've learned to play on my guitar after watching the movie. He photographs trees, he reads physical books, and also, importantly, he supports other people, like his niece, an anonymous child who got lost in the park, and he's able to help out. So by this, he exercises moral agency in Danaher's classification. And so importantly, this is an example, but it shows you how low income, and we see that he lives in a shoebox house, doesn't prevent this man from appreciating life. He has plenty of Ikigai, I would argue. Another interesting reference in that domain is the myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus, where Sisyphus pushes the boulder, is very laborious. He repeats every day, just like the hero here repeats the toilet cleaning action every day. But then we're told you have to imagine Sisyphus is happy, through doing this repetition. So I think that's also an interesting way of thinking about this problem. So finally, in my last slide, I want to think a little bit about policy implications. What are we to make of this? I think the findings from the well-being literature support that the idea that income support is important, and we've seen Betsey show that, in fact, life satisfaction increases with income. but may not be sufficient to promote well-being. And another finding that goes in that direction, recent randomized control trial shows that unconditional cash transfer to low-income Americans did not durably improve mental health. So at first people were, of course, happy to get more income, but then they adapted, and presumably the problems of their life took over. So this really raises the question of, in this potential scenario that we would be in a world without work, where everything is fully automated, what is needed besides income? What are the sorts of new policies and social organization that we can envision so that people can have meaning and flourish in this post-work society? And there, I think, again, economics has a lot to say, because we talk a lot about things like incentive, coordination games, social norms, so we can think about how can we arrive at a new equilibrium that would work and would encourage people to engage in those meaningful activities, even where the incentives around work are removed. Thank you.